The morning alarm sounded across Kepler Station at 0600 hours. Commander Teo was already awake, sitting in his small office on the command level, looking at the dark view of space through the window. In the year 2287, humanity had spread across the stars. The Kepler 452 colony was one of their greatest achievements, a place where thousands of humans lived and worked far from Earth. Teo had spent 15 years here, watching the colony grow from a small outpost to a true city in space. He was proud of his work, proud of his people. Dr. HFY rushed into his office before he could finish his first coffee. She was the colony's chief scientist and the person he trusted most. Her face was bright with excitement, something rare in the routine world of the colony. "Sir, we have received a message from outside our sector," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "A real message. From an intelligent alien species." Teo set down his coffee slowly. He had expected this day would come. They all had. But somehow, it still felt surprising. "Tell me everything," he said. HFY pulled up the signal on his personal screen. The message had come from a civilization that called themselves the Krell Collective. They were an advanced species, far more advanced than humanity. In their transmission, they presented themselves as traders and peaceful explorers. They said they traveled the galaxy looking for new species to share knowledge with, to build trade relationships with, to join a larger community of advanced worlds. "They want to meet," HFY continued. "They have suggested a neutral location, a space station called Harmony 7. They believe we should establish formal relations between our peoples. Commander, this is what we have hoped for. First contact with an advanced civilization." Teo listened carefully. Something in his gut told him to be cautious. But he also knew that HFY was right. This was what humanity had dreamed about. First contact with an alien species that was not hostile, that wanted to trade and share knowledge. This could change everything for humanity's future. "When do they want to meet?" Teo asked. "In 3 weeks. They have sent detailed coordinates and security protocols. Everything seems very organized, very professional." Teo stood and walked to the window. He looked out at the colony, at the lights of the human habitats, at the ships docked at the station. For centuries, humans had wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now, it seemed, they had their answer. "Organize a delegation," he said. "You will lead it. Take a team of experts, scientific advisors, medical specialists, cultural experts, and take Lieutenant Jiho with you. I want someone from Tactical there, even if it is just to observe." HFY nodded happily. "And our security? Take a small military escort. Nothing too large that it seems aggressive, but enough to get you out of trouble if something goes wrong. Captain Ra Young will command the escort ship. She is steady and smart." Over the next 3 weeks, the colony buzzed with activity. The delegation prepared for their historic meeting. HFY spent long hours studying the Krell transmission, trying to learn their language, understanding their culture from the limited information they had shared. The media on Earth was told about the meeting, and billions of humans followed the story. This was huge. This was history. Lieutenant Jiho was less excited than the others. He spent his time checking weapons, ensuring the escort ship was ready for any emergency. In his experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. But he was a soldier, and he would follow orders. Captain Ra Young was practical. She ran through every scenario she could imagine. What if the aliens were hostile? What if they were peaceful? What if something went wrong with the technology? She planned for everything. On the day of departure, Commander Teo stood in the launch bay with HFY. He placed his hand on her shoulder. "Be careful," he said. "Listen more than you speak. Watch everything. And if something feels wrong, if anything seems off, you get out immediately. Understand?" "I understand," HFY replied. "But, sir, I really believe this will be good." The Krell seemed genuinely interested in peaceful relations. They have sent us so much information about their culture, their technology, their trade networks. This is what we have always wanted. Teo wanted to believe her. Part of him did. But the part of him that had survived years in space, the part that had seen things go wrong, told him to be ready for anything. The shuttle launched smoothly into space. HFY pressed her face against the window, watching Kepler Station fade away. Her heart was racing. This moment would define her entire career, she thought. This moment would define humanity's place in the galaxy. 3 days of travel brought them to Harmony 7. The station was impressive, a massive structure built by some unknown alien race many years before. It served as a neutral meeting point for space travelers. As the human shuttle approached, the Krell ship appeared on the scanner. It was huge, far larger than anything humanity had built. The design was strange and sharp, like something alive and dangerous. Lieutenant Ji-ho watched it carefully. Something about it made him uncomfortable, but he said nothing. His orders were to observe. As they docked, HFY took a deep breath. She had prepared a speech about humanity, about Earth, about the hopes they had for peaceful relations. She had gone over it hundreds of times. The docking bay of Harmony 7 was cold and metallic. As the airlock opened, HFY saw them for the first time. The Krell. They were tall and thin, with skin that seemed to shift color slightly in the light. They had intelligence in their eyes, a sharp awareness. The one in front, who identified himself as Ambassador Corvex, stepped forward with what seemed like a smile. "Welcome, humans," Corvex said. His voice was smooth but carried something underneath it that HFY could not quite identify. "We have waited long to meet your kind." HFY extended her hand, following human custom. Corvex looked at it for a moment, then did something that might have been a similar gesture. To HFY, it felt like a moment of true connection between two species. "Thank you for inviting us," HFY said. "We come with peaceful intentions and a strong desire to build a friendship between our peoples." "Of course," Corvex replied. "Come." "We have much to discuss, much to share." As HFY and her team followed the Krell delegation deeper into the station, Lieutenant Ji-ho stayed near the back. He watched everything. He counted exits. He noted the positions of weapons. He was still uncomfortable, though he could not explain why. In the conference room, the negotiations began. Corvex presented the Krell's view of trade, of economic cooperation, of sharing resources. He spoke of how wonderful it would be for humans to join the greater community of advanced worlds. HFY felt her heart soar. This was really happening. Humanity's future was changing in this moment. Neither of them knew that on the Krell's main computer, in files buried deep in their secured systems, the truth was hidden. Records of 17 other species. Records of promises made. Records of what happened to those species after they had agreed to join the Krell community. Records that would have told a very different story. But those records remained hidden, locked away, unseen. The meeting continued through the night cycle. The second day of negotiations seemed to be going perfectly. Dr. HFY sat across from Ambassador Corvex in the conference room, discussing terms of trade and cultural exchange. Everything was proceeding smoothly, exactly as she had hoped. The other Krell representatives were polite and professional. The humans were welcome to tour parts of Harmony 7. It all felt like the beginning of something wonderful. Then, a small accident happened. A young Krell technician was transferring data files to the human delegation's portable storage device. This was supposed to happen. A gift of information about Krell technology and culture. But the technician made a mistake. His fingers were too fast, or perhaps his concentration slipped. Either way, additional folders were selected along with the intended data. Ensign Ye-jun, a young and bright-eyed aide on HFY's team, was standing near the computer terminal. He noticed the error immediately. He was trained to notice such things. The technician realized his mistake and quickly disconnected the device, but not before Ye-Jun saw something on the screen that made his blood run cold. For just a moment, a folder name had appeared. The folder name read, Extermination Protocols, Species Archive, 17 Subjects. Ye-Jun's face went pale. He looked at the Krell technician, but the technician had already turned away. The young human aide said nothing at the time. He simply pocketed the storage device and continued with the tour, his mind racing with possibilities. What could that mean? Extermination? Species Archive? That night, Ye-Jun found a quiet corner in the Harmony 7 station. He connected the storage device to a small personal computer. Most of the files were exactly what they were supposed to be, information about Krell trade and culture. But there, buried deep in the file structure, were the other folders. Ye-Jun opened them, and what he found would change everything. The files were records, detailed, horrifying records of 17 intelligent species. Each file contained their history, their names, their locations. But each file also contained something else, proof that they no longer existed. The Krell had met each species, made promises to them, and then systematically destroyed them all. The records showed how it was done. Trade agreements led to dependency. Dependency led to contracts. Contracts led to loss of independence. And then, the Krell would simply erase them. Some species were enslaved first. Some were used for research. All were ultimately destroyed. One species, called the Varkath, had existed only 200 years ago. They had been peaceful traders, not unlike what the Krell were now claiming about themselves. Another species, the Lethran, had been highly advanced, perhaps even more advanced than the Krell. They had resisted the agreements. The Krell had destroyed their entire civilization in a matter of months. Ye-Jun's hands were shaking as he read. This was not just information about the Krell's past. This was a death sentence for humanity. The Krell were not traitors. They were predators. They were preparing humanity for the same fate that had claimed 17 other species. He knew he had to tell Dr. Heywan immediately, but he also knew that if he was caught with these files, the Krell would know that their secret was discovered. He needed to be careful. He needed to be smart. Ye-Jun made copies of the most important files and encrypted them with a personal code that he knew only he could break. He hid them in different locations throughout the station's computer system. If something happened to him, someone would be able to find them. Then, quietly, he made his way to Haiwan's quarters. It was late, and the station was quiet. Most of the humans were asleep. Ye-Jun used his security code to enter. Haiwan woke up immediately. She saw something in Ye-Jun's eyes that frightened her. "What is wrong?" she asked. Ye-Jun told her everything. He showed her the files on his personal computer. He explained what had happened during the data transfer. And he watched as Dr. Heywan's face changed from confusion to horror to absolute clarity. "We have to leave," she said. "Now. We have to get this information to Commander Teo." "They will not let us leave if they know we have discovered this," Ye-Jun said. Heywan stood up and began gathering things into a bag. "Then we do not tell them. We act like everything is normal. Tomorrow morning, we request to leave early. We say that urgent business has come up on Kepler Station. We do not give them any reason to suspect." She opened her door and quickly summoned Captain Ra Young from the escort ship. Ra Young listened to what they had discovered and immediately understood the danger. She began quietly preparing the ship for emergency departure. The next morning, everything seemed normal. Heywan told Ambassador Korvex that they had received an urgent message from Kepler Station and needed to return immediately. Korvex seemed disappointed, but accepted this. The negotiations, he said, could continue at a later time. But as Haywan and her team were walking through the docking bay toward their shuttle, something went wrong. A Krell security officer appeared directly in front of Ye-Jun. The officer's hand moved quickly, attempting to grab the young human's arm. Ye-Jun, trained in basic combat, twisted away, but the Krell was faster and stronger. The officer pulled a weapon from his side. Haywan saw what was happening and ran toward them. "Run!" she screamed at Ye-Jun. The Krell officer fired his weapon. The blast missed Ye-Jun by centimeters, burning a hole in the wall behind him. Lieutenant Ji-Ho was already moving, pulling a small military-issue weapon from his jacket. He fired a warning shot that struck the Krell officer's shoulder, causing him to stumble backward. The humans ran. They ran as fast as they could toward their shuttle. Behind them, alarms were starting to sound throughout Harmony 7. The docking bay was suddenly filled with emergency lights and warning sounds. Captain Ra Young had the shuttle's engines ready. The moment Haywan and her team crashed through the airlock, she began the launch sequence. The shuttle pulled away from Harmony 7, just as sections of the docking bay began to explode. The Krell were trying to stop them from leaving. The small escort ship fired its defensive systems, creating a barrier of protective energy between the shuttle and the hostile forces on the station. Ra Young flew with perfect precision, navigating through the chaos. Behind them, Ambassador Korvek stood in the observation window of Harmony 7, watching the humans escape. His face showed no emotion. Perhaps they had expected this. Perhaps they had always known that the truth would be discovered. But it did not matter. The humans would be found again, and when they were, they would face the same choice that 17 other species had faced before them. Escape meant nothing. Death was simply delayed. The human shuttle jumped to faster-than-light speed, leaving Harmony 7 and the Krell far behind. But Dr. Haywan knew that the real danger was just beginning. The shuttle arrived at Earth 3 weeks later. Dr. Haywan had spent every moment of the journey analyzing the Krell files, preparing her presentation, and trying to understand the gravity of what they had discovered. The information was overwhelming. 17 species. Hundreds of years of deception. The Krell's entire civilization built on the bones of conquered worlds. Commander Teo met them at the landing bay himself. He could see in Haywan's eyes that something had gone terribly wrong. She looked exhausted, frightened, and determined all at once. In a secure conference room at Earth's United Nations Command Center, Haywan presented the evidence to the world's leaders. She showed them the files, the records, the proof of genocide. The room was silent as they understood the implications. Humanity was not dealing with traitors. They were dealing with predators. But the reactions from the world's leaders were not what Haywan had expected. Some countries wanted to immediately sue for peace. They argued that perhaps humanity could negotiate better terms than the other species had. Perhaps humans had something the Krell wanted that they did not destroy. Perhaps cooperation was the key to survival. Others suggested a different approach. They proposed sending emissaries to the Krell, offering technology, resources, even human genetic material, in exchange for protection. If the Krell were merchants of death, then perhaps they could be bought off. Ambassador HFY, representing the United Nations, was particularly vocal about appeasement. He stood in the assembly and spoke with confidence. "We cannot resist the Krell militarily," he said. "They are far too advanced. Our only chance for survival is to cooperate, to become useful to them. Perhaps we can offer them something they cannot refuse. Perhaps we can prove our value as partners rather than subjects." Haywan listened to this in disbelief. She stood up and addressed the assembly directly. "You do not understand," she said, her voice strong and clear. "The Krell do not negotiate. They have had opportunities to negotiate with every species they destroyed. They choose not to. They view all other life as either useful or useless. Once you are useless, they eliminate you. Offering them our technology, our genetics, our resources will only make us useful for a short time. and then they will take everything and leave us with nothing. But what is your alternative? HFY asked coldly. Do you propose we fight them? We cannot possibly win a war against such a power. No, HFY replied, but we can prepare. We can warn the other species in the galaxy. We can build alliances. We can show the Krell that we are not easy prey. General Q Nam, the chief of Earth's military, listened carefully. He was a practical man who had spent his entire life preparing for war. The evidence that HFY presented was clear. The threat was real. We should begin military preparations immediately, he said. Increase production of weapons and ships. Move civilian populations away from vulnerable colonies. Begin training for combat. That is a waste of resources, HFY argued. If we provoke the Krell by arming ourselves, we will only guarantee our destruction. And if we do nothing, we guarantee our destruction as well, Q Nam replied. At least if we fight, we have a chance. The debate raged for days. Earth's political leaders were divided, uncertain, afraid. Some regions wanted to prepare for war. Others wanted to seek peace. Some wanted to hide, to avoid the Krell's attention entirely. In the end, it was Commander Teo who made the decision that would change everything. He recorded a message to be broadcast to every human colony, every space station, every ship in human territory. He also sent it to every alien nation and species within communication range. The message was simple and direct. In it, Teo laid out the truth about the Krell. He showed evidence of their crimes. He explained their history of genocide, and he made a declaration that would echo through the galaxy. To all human colonies and nations, he said, his face calm but his voice strong. We are facing an immediate threat. The Krell Collective is planning to invade human space. They intend to conquer us or destroy us. We will not accept either option. We are mobilizing all available military and civilian resources. Every colony is instructed to prepare for combat. Every capable person should volunteer for military service. We will not run. We will not hide. We will not bargain with murderers. The message continued, explaining the evidence and calling on the galaxy's other species to join humanity in resisting Krell expansion. The galaxy's reaction was mixed. Some species dismissed the warning as paranoia, others saw an opportunity. If the Krell were distracted by a war with humanity, perhaps the other galactic powers could expand their own territories. A few species, those that had been harmed by Krell in the past, began to reach out to humanity about possible alliance. On Kepler Station, Commander Teo began the real work of preparation. Ships were diverted to military service. Scientists were reassigned to weapons development. Civilian populations on the most vulnerable colonies were relocated to more secure locations. Dr. HFY threw herself into the effort. She worked with scientists around the galaxy to develop new defense technologies. She studied Krell physiology and tactics, trying to find any weakness that humanity could exploit. Dr. Min Hai, an astrophysicist, helped HFY analyze the Krell files. Together, they discovered patterns in the Krell's previous attacks. The patterns suggested that the Krell had certain limitations in their strategy. They were powerful, but they were not invincible. Look here, Min Hai said, pointing at data on a screen. Every time the Krell faced a species that organized its forces in an unusual way, it took them longer to achieve victory. They are used to conventional warfare. They expect their enemies to fight in traditional ways. HFY's eyes widened. If we fight unconventionally, if we surprise them with tactics they do not expect, we might be able to survive longer than they anticipate. Council member Hyo Jin, a voice of reason in the United Nations Assembly, pushed for resources to be directed toward civilian evacuation plans. She argued that humanity should not put all its hope in military victory. Some people needed to survive, to preserve human knowledge and culture, even if the worst happened. We should hope for victory, she told the assembly. But we should also prepare for survival beyond this war. We need backup plans. We need places where human civilization can continue if Earth itself falls. Over the following weeks and months, humanity transformed. A species that had lived in relative peace for centuries suddenly became a civilization preparing for total war. And in the darkness of space, far away in Krell territory, the Krell Collective received reports of human military mobilization. The triumvirate leaders of the Krell discussed this development. Some saw it as irrelevant. Humans could prepare all they wished. The Krell's superiority was absolute, but others recognized that this particular species was different. These humans were not running. They were not hiding. They were preparing to fight. The Krell decided to accelerate their invasion timeline. It was time to finish this before humanity became any more of a problem. The transmission from the Krell Collective came on a normal day. The galaxy was not expecting it. Many people thought the Krell invasion was still weeks or months away. But as the message was received by human communication stations across known space, everyone realized that the waiting was over. The Krell had sent their demands. The message was broadcast in a way that all intelligent species could receive it. On screens across the galaxy, the face of Krell triumvirate leader Jakul appeared. He was larger than the other Krell, his skin a deep red color that seemed to shift in the light. His eyes were cold and ancient, filled with the certainty of a being who had never been challenged and never expected to be. To the species known as humanity, Jakul began, his voice steady and calm. We have observed your kind. We have studied your capabilities. You are a developing species with moderate intelligence. We offer you now what we have offered others before you, a choice. Jakul paused, and in that pause, the entire human civilization held its breath. Option 1, he continued. You may surrender all military authority to the Krell Collective. Your populations will be integrated into our workforce. You will serve the Krell, and in return, you will be allowed to live. Your children will work for us. Your talents will serve us, but you will live. This is a generous option for a species of your limited capacity. The screen showed images of human-like beings working in vast facilities, mining, building, serving Krell masters. It was slavery, clear and obvious slavery. Option 2, Jakul said. We will incorporate your genetic material into our breeding programs. Your people possess certain traits that could strengthen the Krell stock. Selected members of your species will be taken for this purpose. Your people will be allowed to continue living in designated zones on designated worlds under Krell supervision. You will breed according to our requirements, and your genetic legacy will continue even if it becomes diluted in the Krell population. The images that followed were worse. They showed humans imprisoned in biological facilities, treated as stock animals. There was no freedom, no dignity, only a slow extinction of identity. Option 3, Jakul said, and his voice took on a tone of regret that sounded absolutely false. Complete elimination. If you choose to resist, if you choose to fight, we will destroy you utterly. Every human world will be erased. Every human ship will be obliterated. Not a single human will remain alive to remember that your kind ever existed. The screen showed images of planets burning, of worlds being turned to ash. The Krell had shown videos from their attacks on other species. Humanity was watching the fate that had befallen the Varkoth, the Lethran, and 15 other civilizations. You have 90 days to decide, Jakul concluded. When 90 days have passed, we will arrive at your primary world. If you have not chosen one of the first two options, we will implement option 3. The choice is yours. The transmission ended. For the first time since humanity had achieved civilization, the entire species faced the same question at the same moment. Surrender or die. Around the world, In space stations and on distant colonies, people reacted with fear and despair. Some called for immediate surrender. Why fight when you could live, even if life meant slavery? Some people wanted to negotiate, to offer concessions that might change the Krell's mind. But there were also those who would not accept any of the options the Krell had presented. Commander Teo sat in the command center at Kepler Station. Around him were military leaders from nations across Earth. Captain Do Jin, the fleet commander, was present. So was Admiral Park, who commanded Earth's Pacific Fleet. Dr. Sua, the weapons systems designer, sat in the back, her face grim. "We cannot fight them," one of the generals said. "We do not have the military strength. Surrender is our only real option." "Surrender means the end of human freedom," Teo replied. "It means our children grow up as slaves, or worse, that our genetics are stolen and used to make more Krell. That is not survival. That is extinction with a different name." "But what is the alternative?" asked another officer. "We cannot possibly defeat an enemy this powerful." Teo stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the vastness of space. "We might not defeat them," he said slowly, "but we can make them regret attacking us. We can show them that we are not prey. We can inspire other species to resist, and we can fight knowing that we fought for something that matters. That is what humans do. We do not bargain with murderers." He turned back to face the assembled leaders. "I am asking for your authorization to prepare humanity for total war," Teo said. "We will not surrender. We will not accept slavery or genetic theft. We will fight with everything we have." The vote was close, but the authorization passed. Humanity would fight. Teo then sat down and recorded his response to the Krell ultimatum. He did not record it as a military leader only. He recorded it as a representative of humanity. "To the Krell Collective," he began, his voice steady and clear. "We have received your ultimatum. We have discussed your options, and we have made our choice." He paused, and in that pause, billions of humans across known space held their breath. "We do not bargain with murderers," Teo said. "We do not trade freedom for slavery. We do not surrender our dignity or our genetics to save our lives. You have killed 17 species before us. You have erased entire civilizations from history. You thought we would break, that we would choose slavery or extinction without a fight." Teo leaned forward, and his eyes seemed to look directly at Jakul himself. "You were wrong. We are human. We have survived ice ages and wars and famines. We have crossed oceans, and now we have crossed the stars. You can kill us, yes. You are powerful, yes. But you cannot make us surrender. You cannot make us bow. And if you want humanity, you will have to pay with your own blood. And when this is over, when the dust settles, the galaxy will know that humans do not bargain with murderers. We fight them." Teo sent the message directly to the Krell Collective, and he also broadcast it across all human communication networks and to every alien species that would listen. The response was immediate and shocking. The galaxy erupted in reaction. Some species condemned humanity for its foolishness. Some celebrated human courage. Some rushed to the Krell to offer alliance, hoping to be spared when the humans were destroyed. But in the deep darkness of space, fleets began to move. The Krell invasion force, which had been planning a slow and methodical campaign, accelerated. The 90-day ultimatum became the beginning of the 90-day war. The universe held its breath. The age of galactic peace was over. Something new and terrible was beginning. The first weeks of the war were chaos. The Krell attacked with overwhelming force, hitting multiple human colonies simultaneously. Some colonies were destroyed quickly. Others managed to evacuate their populations before the Krell arrived. But humanity was not fighting a conventional war. Captain Sun-Hee was the finest pilot humanity had ever produced. She flew her fighter ship with an instinct that seemed almost supernatural. When the Krell launched their first major assault on a human supply convoy, Sun-Hee was waiting. She had hidden her squadron in an asteroid field, using rocks and ice to mask their position. The Krell ships came in formation, expecting an easy victory. They had conquered 18 species before. They expected humans would fight like humans always did. But Sun-Hee did not fight like a human. She fought like someone who had nothing to lose and everything to prove. She led her squadron in an attack pattern that the Krell had never encountered. Instead of facing them in open space, the human fighters used the asteroids for cover. They struck fast and retreated quickly. The Krell ships were more powerful, but they were also larger and less maneuverable. Sun-Hee used every advantage that humanity's smaller and faster technology could provide. By the time the battle ended, 3 Krell ships had been destroyed. It was not a total victory. The Krell still damaged the convoy, still destroyed supplies. But it was proof that humans could hurt the Krell. It was proof that the invaders were not invincible. The victory spread through human communications networks. It gave people hope. On Earth, Dr. Ahewan was working on a different kind of warfare. She had assembled a team of computer scientists and hackers. Their mission was to attack the Krell's communication and command systems from a distance. The Krell's technology was more advanced than humanity's. But they had one weakness. Their systems were complex, and complex systems always had vulnerabilities. The cyber attacks began slowly, small infiltrations into Krell networks, subtle disruptions of their communications. Nothing catastrophic, but slowly, the Krell's ability to coordinate their forces began to degrade. Messages that should have reached commanders in seconds took minutes. Weapon systems that should have responded instantly developed delays. Sergeant Tae-sung led the ground forces. He coordinated resistance movements on Krell-occupied worlds. Instead of fighting large conventional battles, the humans fought using guerrilla tactics. They struck supply lines. They destroyed Krell facilities. They made the occupation costly and difficult. And slowly, a narrative began to build. The narrative was simple. Humans do not surrender. They do not give up. Even when facing overwhelming odds, they continue to fight. The story spread from colony to colony, from ship to ship. It spread through the alien news networks as well. The galaxy watched with growing amazement as a young species, one that had only recently developed space travel, managed to survive against the unstoppable Krell. Dr. Haewan reached out to other species that had been affected by Krell expansion. She found the survivors of worlds that had resisted the Krell centuries before. She found species that had lost territory and freedom to Krell aggression. Slowly, a coalition began to form. The first to join was the Vexthari, a species that had lost half their population to Krell breeding programs. Next came the Tolran, who had been enslaved for 50 years before achieving independence. Then the Tikes, the Uthian, and others. Each species had its own reasons for hating the Krell. Each species joined because humanity had dared to fight. Ensign Nari coordinated communications between the coalition partners. She managed the intelligence networks that tracked Krell movements and shared information between the various allied forces. She was young, barely an adult, but her brilliance at organizing information gave the coalition enormous advantages. The war continued, and the momentum began to shift. Not because humanity was stronger than the Krell, humanity was not, but because humans were willing to do things that other species had not dared to do. They were willing to risk everything. They were willing to continue fighting even when victory seemed impossible. Captain Sun-Hee led a daring raid on a Krell supply station. Her squadron destroyed enough resources to set back Krell operations in an entire sector by months. The raid cost human lives. 3 of Sun-Hee's pilots did not return, but the strategic impact was enormous. Sergeant Tae-sung led a liberation force that freed thousands of enslaved creatures from a Krell detention facility. The operation was dangerous and technically a failure in military terms. The Krell destroyed the facility rather than let it be captured. But the message was clear. Humanity and its allies were fighting to free others, not to conquer them. The Krell triumvirate began to understand that this war was not going according to plan. They had expected human resistance to break after the first month. They had expected the coalition allies to abandon humanity after suffering losses. They had expected the galaxy to accept Krell dominance as inevitable. But humans and their allies continued to fight. In response, the Krell committed even more forces to the invasion. They began to escalate the war, destroying entire planetary systems. They believed that if they caused enough destruction, if they killed enough humans and allies, the resistance would finally break. Instead, the destruction only strengthened human determination. Every colony destroyed became a motivation for survivors to continue fighting. Every Krell attack only reinforced the message that the galaxy could not live with Krell rule. Dr. Haywan coordinated a galaxy-wide information campaign. She broadcast the evidence of Krell genocide across all known communication channels. She told the story of the 17 species that had been destroyed. She showed images of Krell cruelty and Krell exploitation. The galaxy began to see the Krell differently. Where once they had seemed like an unstoppable force of nature, now they seemed like what they truly were: murderers and slavers. Species that had previously been neutral began to support the human-led coalition. Even some species that had initially allied with the Krell began to reconsider their positions. The 90-day ultimatum had begun 90 days ago. The deadline was approaching. Commander Teo had told the Krell that if they wanted humanity, they would have to pay with blood. That prediction was coming true. The Krell invasion had cost them more than any previous conquest. Their losses were mounting. Their supplies were diminishing. Their communications were in chaos because of human cyber attacks. The Krell were not losing. The war had only just begun. But for the first time in their history, the Krell were not winning easily, and they had never faced such determination. They had never encountered a species willing to fight to the last person rather than accept slavery. As the 90-day mark approached, both sides prepared for the final confrontation. The Krell mobilized their entire invasion fleet. Commander Teo mobilized every human and allied ship. The final battle would be enormous. One side would emerge victorious. The other would be shattered. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the future of the galaxy.